Hi YouTube, this is Ben from New England Milsurp, and today I'm going to be taking apart this Daewoo K2 rifle. This is the civilian version of the South Korean military standard issue rifle, the K2. And this is not a AR 100, this is not an Max 2, this is an actual K2. Not certain if you can see the markings here. Turn this around. But right there, it is a K2, made in Korea, 5.56 or 223. And this is going to be a short takedown video. If you're looking for a video of the gun being fired or a review video talking about some of the features, the review video will come up later, and I will link that in the description once it's done. But the shooting video is already up, and I will also link that in the description. So, to start disassembly, you should ensure that the gun is safe. So what we're going to do is take out the magazine. It is empty. Place that on the side and check the chamber. There's nothing in there. It is safe, and now we can proceed. So the first step to disassembly is to, just very similar to an AR, we're going to open it up. So we're going to do that by pulling this back and pushing it forward. Then we can take the lower off of the upper by pushing this pin from the back and removing it. Now we're going to remove the recoil spring. And the bolt carrier and piston. Once it's in the back position, you can take the charging handle out. Now you have the bolt carrier and the piston out. After you do that, you can, well, you could do this at any time really, but you can remove the gas selector from the front of the piston tube, or the gas tube. And by doing that, you rotate it about 45 degrees and slide it right out. And always remember when you're putting that back in to set it properly so that when you're at the range you don't have an accident and either turn it off or put too much gas or not enough gas. Always adjust appropriately to the ammunition and settings that you're firing in. So that's all you really need to do to the upper. If you want to, you can take the handguards off. And to do that, all you need is a slotted or flathead screwdriver. And you're going to loosen this screw. Pull that right out, set it aside. Slide your handguards forward. They'll come off in two halves. So you can see they're polymer on the outside with a aluminum heat shield on the inside. And these are the original ones that come with the rifle. I haven't changed those out. The only modification that I've made to this rifle thus far is adding the Lucid HG7 Gen 3 optic. Because I wasn't a big fan of the irons on it. Some people like them. They just didn't work for me. Now, you're going to take the lower, and you can see at the bottom you have a storage cell for various different things to the rifle. Much like American Magpul grips for ARs and various other ones that have storage in the bottom, you're going to pull this, retract it, and pull it right out. There's two containers inside it. Then you're going to remove the screw on the inside. One of the caps came out. And while you're doing this, be very careful because there is a tension spring inside the grip which tensions the fire selector so when you're turning it, you actually have a spring detent in there. So that's under pressure. So while we do this, we're going to do it nice and slow so that it doesn't fly off into the abyss and we lose it forever. And then have to figure out what we're going to do to replace it. I've had to do that in the past with handguns. I once used a Zippo lighter spring on a handgun because I could not immediately find something to replace it with. Hands are a little bit greasy here. this is the tricky part. Take it off real easily. Slowly lift it up, and you will see the spring right here. Be careful, there's also a detent in there, so if you're going to turn it around, you want to make sure that you catch that before you lose it. Let's set that aside as well. So now that that is out, the safety selector lever can be removed, and you could go about taking apart the rest of the trigger group, which I'm not going to do right now, but in essence it's exactly identical to a standard AR trigger group, with the exception of this fire selector, which turns 180 degrees instead of 90 degrees. I've heard that drop-in AR trigger groups will actually work in this with very slight modification, but I have not tested that out myself, so I cannot personally attest to it. Next thing you can do is remove the butt pad, which if you do not yet own a Daewoo, you might be surprised at what's inside, or you might not be if you own a number of other rifles. The SKSs have them, and some AKs. Although Daewoos have been in the United States for quite a long time, so not all of them will have this, but if you're lucky, you'll still have the original cleaning kit, which was imported with the rifle. I don't actually use this kit. I have my own cleaning tools, but it's kind of interesting little factoid. There's complete rod and everything you would need to maintain the rifle except for oil in here. I'm not 100% what these would be used for, either batteries or I guess potentially you could keep oil in them, as they do seem to have O-rings on them, but I don't know. I haven't looked into that thoroughly enough. If you wanted to take the stock off, there is a flathead screw all the way in the bottom, which you need a very long screwdriver to access. Or actually, I might take that back. Oh, I'm sorry. You can access it from this side if you'd like to take that off, but we're not going to do that because it's fairly tight and I don't feel like it. So, let's put it back together. Put our cleaning kit right back where it was, where I found it when I originally bought it. Oops, I didn't pack that in the right way. I suppose these bags are seen better days, but they probably came from the 70s, so they're not doing too bad for their age, despite being completely full of holes. There we go. And the other miscellaneous wads and Q-tips go back in there with the cleaning brush. Okay, and now we can replace the butt pad back to where it originally went. And you just want to make this hand tight. It doesn't have to be excessively tight to stay in place. It's not going to go anywhere. It'll be against your shoulder most of the time when you're shooting it anyway. I would suggest that with the also with the hand grip on this, or really any of the screws. Don't want to strip them out because you'll never be able to find replacements, and you'll have to make your own given the rarity of these rifles. Especially if you strip out the inner threads. So there we go. It's on there good. So now we're going to take it back and flip it over and put the hand grip back on. pistol grip. So you're going to take your spring and your detent, but you're not going to use those yet because you are going to first put your safety selector lever back on. And that can be in any position. I just like to put it on safe and put the detent back in place very carefully. And it goes. And the spring. Now we're going to take our pistol grip with the screw still inside of it and line that up and line up the spring. Just like that. Screw that back in place. Yet again, this is where I noticed that my hands are a little bit greasy, but that's okay, we'll get it in there. Make sure the spring is still lined up, and it is. Sure that the safety selector still works and the detent is working properly. Now we can set that aside and move on to the upper after we put in our little pouch here for the grip. Now we can replace the gas selector on the upper. And again, to put this back in, you just make sure that the fins are vertical and you'll slide that in place, depress the detent, turn it until it's the correct location. If the rifle is clean, I suggest putting this on the S or small setting, which is the smallest of the gas holes in there, so that you're not overgassing it. If you're overgassing it, I've noticed that it slams the bolt carrier back and will potentially damage that, but it will also destroy the brass against the ejector. And you'll see that when you pick up the brass, it'll have large dents in it, and that's how you know that you're overgassing it. Now we're going to take the grips and put them back on. Those slide into place. And make sure the screw hole is aligned. Place the screw, and again make it hand tight. Now that that's set, we can take our piston, bolt carrier, and bolt and put those back in place, as well as the recoil spring. To do this, you want to first take the piston and bolt carrier and put them together. And hold those in place. Take your upper and align them in their respective locations. Oop. Sometimes easier said than done. Then we're going to not let it slide all the way forward, but just enough so that we can get the charging handle back in. Now that that's in place, we can take our recoil spring and set that back into the upper receiver. Now we're going to take our lower and lock that back in place. This is again one of those things that has a very particular angle, so I'm actually going to do this a slightly different way since I can't fidget this the way that I'd like to since I have the camera in front of me. I'm going to take my recoil spring out and just align the upper with the lower, and hopefully that will allow me to get it back in. There it is. Now the recoil spring goes back in, and we're going to depress that just slightly to get it back in and lock it, and then we can lock the top piece, and now it can't go anywhere. Now a quick function check. We're on not safe, so that's alright. I'm going to put that in safe even though it's unloaded. Function check the bolt and the trigger. Now that we know that it's clear, it is safe to depress the trigger. And that completes the disassembly of the Daewoo K2. Stay tuned for further videos on this relatively rare rifle in the United States.